All right, hello and welcome everybody to the April 24th, 2024 City of Mesa Planning and Zoning Board public hearing. We actually are starting with a special meeting today, and we'll begin by taking a roll call. So Chair Ayers is here, Vice Chair Pitcher.
Here.
Board Member Crockett.
Here.
Board Member Peterson.
Here.
Board Member Montez.
Here.
Board Member Blakeman.
Here.
Board Member Carpenter.
Here.
All right, we're all here and we appreciate it. As part of today, actually we do the consent agenda later, don't we? So never mind. Oh, there's another blue card. All right. So as I said, we have a special meeting to start where we're going to discuss the general plan updates. And so we'll begin with that. And Mary ran away. Oh, there she is. We'll turn the time over for staff for presentation.
Board members, is this mic on? Okay. We're very excited to be here today for our second hearing for the general plan recommendation to City Council. We'll preface this is a very similar presentation to what you saw on Monday, so hope we won't bore you too much, but we think it's beneficial for the general public to be purview to this as well. But I'll let Jeff start off the presentation here today.
Very good. Thank you, Chair Board. Great to be with you tonight. I'm going to start a little bit about the background of the plan, taking us from where we've been when we started since 2022. And then I'm going to talk about the community engagement, then I'll turn it over to Rachel for the rest of the presentation. So let's start with the basics. Why do we do a general plan? A general plan is required by Arizona state statute that cities update their plan or adopt a plan every 10 years. We did our last plan, the 2040 general plan, back in 2014. So we are up for renewal, and that's why we started this process 2 years ago in anticipation of a deadline for adopting a new plan. The general plan is a very important document for the city, for both residents, for developers, for especially the planning department, and thinking about how we plan for the future and develop long-term for our city. It expresses the values of the city and our aspirations, what we want the city to become, and it also outlines future plans, programs, investments, and it can be a reference point for boards like the Planning and Zoning Board, also the City Council. It also helps us to continue to have continuity. We know that there are crises that pop out all the time, and having a plan that's long-term that helps us to keep our focus even when we may want to knee-jerk and pivot in a different direction is incredibly helpful for the stability of a city of this size and complexity. When we began this process, we reached out to the Mesa City Council, heard their feedback, met with them. We met with, we have a General Plan Citizen Advisory Committee that's our residents that were appointed by the Mesa City Council to help guide this process, especially the public engagement portion. They've done a fantastic job. They gave us feedback, and then we met with appointed boards throughout the city to hear their feedback. And these were some of the objectives that we heard from these bodies about what the plan needed to achieve. It needed to establish a compelling vision for the city. It had to be user-friendly, something that any resident could pick up and understand. It was not to be written in legalese. It's understandable. We want it to be visually appealing, something that's exciting to read, that really shows the uniqueness of our incredible city. It also needs to leverage technology in how we engage with our residents and explain the different concepts that are within a planning document such as this. It also provides clear guidance for development that helps our developers know what the rules are, and we all have the same set of rules. And then it also needs to interface seamlessly with other city plans. I'm going to talk about this for just a moment. We had multiple other plans at the city that were moving in parallel. So the transportation plan, the transit plan, the water integrated master plan, arts and culture plan. We do a lot of planning at the city, don't we? But all of these plans are incredibly important that they sync with the general plan, that they're all moving in the same direction, that they all support the same vision and values. And so we put in considerable effort to work with these other plans to ensure that what they're saying in their specific plans aligns perfectly with the 2050 general plan. And this will be of great value as we move forward in, again, establishing that continuity, that same voice for the entire city. And then lastly, of course, this goes without saying that everything we do has to meet state statute. I'll say that 3 times. The state gives us a lot of guidelines on what needs to be in the plan, and we have worked closely to make sure that the plan achieves all of those requirements. I'm going to pause here real quick because I think this is a great image. This is what you're seeing here. This is part of our engagement with the public. This is the first in the nation immersive experience with youth that's using a real general plan. We went over to the studios, or excuse me, to the ASU Mix Center here in downtown, and we worked with the fantastic and innovative folks at ASU to create scenarios where youth could come in and actually walk through the different place types that are being proposed in the general plan. So we took the description, we mocked it up, threw it into a 3D environment, and we had over 500 youth, over 10 different high schools. That's nearly, I want to say every high school in the city came to participate in this process, and we gained a lot of great experience and feedback from students who could, instead of just filling out a survey, got to live inside what we envisioned for different parts of our future city. So it was a very great and innovative way of doing engagement. This is our loop diagram. It tells us about our public engagement process. I just want to talk about the process, the thought process behind how we came up with the plan. We started off with our community context in early 2023, and that was aimed specifically at just asking residents, what do you think of Mesa today? And then we went back a few months later and said, okay, now that we know what you think about Mesa today, what do you want Mesa to be in the future? And not just about changes, it's also asking the question, what do you love about Mesa that you don't want to change? What do you want to exist 30 years from now in Mesa? And then once we had all those ideas, we came back with the public and said, okay, we can't do everything that you want to do, and some of these things conflict. So what are your priorities? What's most important to you? And then after we went through that process, we finally had enough information to start writing the plan. So I want to emphasize that we did not start writing the plan until after we had a solid foundation of public feedback telling us what the community wanted, and then we put pen to paper. So we did that throughout the fall. Rachel especially had some very late nights and weekends, and our consultant doing just incredible work to try to synthesize and then capture all of these public sentiments. Then we had our draft plan. We put that out to the public earlier this year for a 60-day review. And now we are coming to you, a board, to give you the plan and say, okay, did we get it right? And we have met with you several times to go over the plan, our thought process in putting this together. This all leads to the culminating event, which is the city council taking action on the plan. If they approve the plan, it will appear on the November 2024 ballot for ratification by Mesa voters, which is required by state law. Our public engagement, we had over 14,000 engagements. This is what we mean when we say engagements. We talk about individual contact with residents. So that's people coming to a presentation like this, or coming to one of our public meetings, or we run into them at a booth at one of the many public events we attended, and having a real interaction with them and talking to them about what a general plan is and why it even matters. Over 28,000 people came to our website since the beginning of the project, when we had over 4,000 contributions. These are tangible pieces of feedback that we could use, interpret, and try to understand the vision and the priorities of our residents. Our social engagement was also very strong. We had over 1.5 million impressions. These are times that people saw our content online. And then we had over 4,000 clicks. So that's people seeing our content and then saying, oh, that's interesting, I want to learn more. And then navigating to our website. And then we also advertised quite a bit in Spanish, and we had just under 4,000 clicks with a total of 17,000. So these are different metrics, but if you were to combine them together and say, okay, the 14,000 people we engaged in person, and then this online engagement, and merge that together, we had over 31,000 engagements. Now, we have a city of over 500,000. We would love to engage with every single resident on this. It is a very important document, but the important thing that we're trying to convey here is it gave staff enough of an understanding to be able to write the plan and to feel like we were able to capture it accurately. And that was very, very important as you're getting from what I'm communicating here. So at this point, I'm going to pause and see if you have any questions, and then we'll turn it over to Rachel.
Jeff and Rachel, thanks for the presentation and for the long work on the plan too. How would you summarize the biggest vision differences between this plan and the existing 2040 plan as you've gone through the process?
I have some thoughts. Do you want to start, Rachel?
No, go ahead, because I need to think about that.
Okay. We've done It's a good question. So when we looked back at the 2040 plan, I want to start with this. It's similar because in 10 years, we haven't completely changed who we are. So when we look back and see the vision and the values back then, there's a whole lot of alignment. One of the things that was incredibly important to us in this plan had to do with community character. And the 2040 plan talks about community character a lot. It's not vacant in that plan. But we wanted to create additional tools to really protect areas with unique character throughout the city. And so we did a lot of extra work. For example, just one of the communities we worked with was the Lehigh community. And they said, we are unique in who we are and the way we live, and we want to be able to protect this neighborhood. So part of all of that engagement led to the strategy map, the growth strategy map. That was not a creation that existed in the 2040 plan, but it's new in the 2050 plan, and it gives us an additional layer to be able to look at an area and say, okay, this may be the place type, but are we looking for really transformative growth in this area? Or are we looking for more moderate growth? And so that extra tool, that extra overlay in the plan is incredibly important for the planners in being able to interpret how much we want a scale of change. So that was new, and we think it's going to help us to really hit home on this theme that's been existing for many years. Is we want unique places in Mesa that feel unique, that are special. When you go into them, you know you've come into a different community. We want to protect those and help them to continue to be what they are. And not only that, but to maybe find new areas that have some budding character, and to be able to really help develop those into their own standalone special places in the city.
I agree with everything Jeff said, but I'll add a little bit of a different perspective. So when we were going through the visioning process, we looked at our current general plan, and we looked at some of the key topics that were coming out of our public engagement. And when we started creating our strategies and our guiding principles, we looked at how those align. And you can see, if you look back, they are very similar in a lot of the topics that they cover. But I'll say the one aspect that I see a difference in is the difference between the 2014, there was very much an emphasis on growing jobs within the city. And so if you can see in the general plan there, they talk a lot about the job to housing ratio. And when we went into our new general plan update, there was much more focus on housing in this general plan from the community outreach. So you can see there was kind of a shift there, where at one point we were really in the need of, creating an economic situation and creating jobs in the city, whereas we see now that the kind of vision and the focus kind of shifted more towards addressing our housing needs. So I'll say for me, that was one perspective that I saw a difference and kind of a shift between the two.
If I could add, Chair and Board, I think one of the other shifts that we really looked at was, and it sounds structural, but it's really not, but the organization of it, so that with that vision statement, we wanted to make sure that all of the guiding principles were helping us to achieve that vision, and that all of the strategies that then came in each of the different elements that were required, that everything is feeding up into that vision, which is what we heard from the community. So I think that structural element is a little bit different, and it will also help us with like our reporting out to the state, or our reporting out to the city council in terms of what the general plan accomplishments are each year. So I think that was also a big difference in this plan from the last one.
Hey, Rachel and Jeff, thank you for that presentation. My question is, we're going to vote on this today. It'll go to the council in May. Assume the council approves it in May. What type of public education happens once you have an approved plan that is now going to the ballot? What happens between May and November to educate the public on this plan and what's in it, and maybe why they should support it?
Great question, Chair, Board Member. I'm going to look carefully over at our attorneys here, because there are some limitations on what we can do as a public agency. And Sarah, please jump in and step on my toe if I get any of this wrong. But we cannot use public funds to promote a ballot item that is prohibited in the state of Arizona. So what we are doing, we are working very closely with our Channel 11. They're fantastic at what they do for video work and digital engagement. And we're creating a video that we work very closely with legal to make sure it's not promoting, it's just providing information saying, these are the facts. And we're not leaning you one way or another. It's just, where do you find information? What is the general plan? And we will be promoting that video throughout. One of the other things that's very important is that we do lean on our partners who are outside the city to help be the voice of the plan if they are supportive of it. Because we cannot be the ones leading that. We hope that to a certain extent our general plan advisory committee, who are our citizens, can stand up and say, hey, we were part of this, we believe in this, or other parties can help be the voice. But ultimately, we are somewhat limited on we as a government can do, and we have to be very careful of those restrictions.
Okay. Board chair members, are there any more questions before okay. Well, I wanted to go through the structure and give you an idea of how the plan is structured and some of the basic content of the plan. And just leading up into that, just to kind of circle back to the public engagement section, that really helped inform the vision and really the content of the general plan. And on the slide before you, you see some of the key themes that came out of that public engagement. And what that did was that really informed what our vision statement is for the future. So for the 2050 vision statement that's on the screen before you, it's that Mesa is a safe, desirable, family-centered community that celebrates our heritage and innovative spirit, seeks economic prosperity for all, prioritizes quality places, and offers choices where we live, work, play, and learn. So that community feedback, along with that vision that really built in, we saw these core values that emerged from a lot of those concepts, and those revolved around the people, the land, and the economy. And so we use those core values as a way to organize the plan. So you'll see that those serve as the main chapters within the plan. But we do have 5 chapters overall, so that includes an introduction and a implementation chapter as well. But within each one of those chapters, they contain a section that's an introduction to the chapter itself. And then there are the section elements. So within the land, the people, and the economy, there's certain required elements required by the state that are covered within those sections. And you'll see when we go further into the presentation that you're going to see some asterisks because those are required elements per state statute that we must cover within our general plan. And then within each one of those sections, we have a guiding principle for them. So what is our vision for achieving and accomplishing the goals of each one of those sections? What's the intention vision for that? And then finally, we have a set of strategies to help accomplish that. So for the introduction chapter, it starts by giving an overview of what a general plan is and why we're doing the general plan process. It then goes into our community engagement summary and discusses what we did for community engagement in the development of this plan. Then we go into a kind of contextual section where we talk about Mesa's history, all the way from its creation up to where we are now, and giving current statistics on the current status of the city. Then we give a description of the overall plan structure to help someone kind of navigate and understand when they continue on reading the document, what they're going to be looking for and what they're going to be reading. And with that, there's also a description of what the vision statement is, a description of what the core values, the guiding principles, strategies, and actions are. So within the first chapter, which is the people, well, it's chapter 2, but it's the first one of the core elements of the plan, the people. It has 4 sections, and within that chapter, it describes great neighborhoods, history, arts, and cultural resources, human services, and public safety. Within the next chapter, chapter 3, it is the land. This contains 4 sections which describe housing, circulation and mobility, parks and open space, and land use and urban design. Chapter 3 is a little unique because it also contains our future land use plan, which consists of a place type descriptions, our place type maps, a growth strategy map, and consistency criteria for finding consistency for development proposals with the general plan. When we talk about place types, those are descriptions of the future land use, and you'll know them in terms of our current general plan as character areas. But what those do is they describe the character of a place, they describe the typical land uses that you would find within them, they specify the density and intensity of the developments that are anticipated to be developed there. They describe urban design characteristics of how we want these places to eventually evolve and develop. And then finally, it has a growth strategy for each one of those place types, which describes kind of more specifically what the growth strategy for that place type means and looks like. There are 12 place types within the city, and so that place type map is just that depiction of where those are located. Getting into the growth strategy map, as Jeff was mentioning earlier, this is a new element within the general plan. It's actually a required element from state statute, as we're required to have a growth element within our general plan. Previously, we just identified some economic opportunity zones, and we decided that it would be a great opportunity now to really help us evaluate and plan for our future development within the city. So there are 3 growth strategies they're specified within this growth strategy map and plan. So the first one of those are conserve areas. So those are areas within the city that we want to preserve and we want to remain largely in their current conditions. You may see some home improvements within those areas. You may continue to see development of vacant lands within those areas in accordance with their place types. And you may also see some very small kind of readaptive reuse in those areas. The next one of those is sustain. Sustain are areas that are encouraged to remain generally in their current condition. A lot of those areas you'll see within our neighborhoods, so we know that we really don't want to see some full-scale redevelopment of those areas. We really want to see them remain how they are, but we would like to see some general redevelopment and infill in appropriate places as they age and as they age and become a little older. So the last one of the growth strategies is evolve. So these are areas that are vacant, they're blighted, they're really primed for redevelopment. So these are areas that we want to see growth be focused within the city. Before I move on, are there any questions about any of these before I move on to the economy? Okay. So chapter 4, the economy, has 3 sections which describe economic development, environment conservation, energy and water, and public facilities and services. And then lastly, we have our implementation chapter. So this describes the city's implementation tools, such as our city codes, our design guidelines, and our various other city plans. So these are the tools that we use to implement the general plan and other various sub-area plans, specific plans. Within this chapter, it also introduces our companion action plan. So it is not part of the general plan that's being adopted and voted on now, but it is our implementation guide for the future. So after, fingers crossed, the citizens ratify and vote the general plan in, what will happen is the city will work with our city council or city manager to really align this with our budget process and with council priorities to determine what are the actions that we're going to focus on within the next 3 to 5 years. And then lastly, the implementation chapter describes our general plan amendment process. So if there are desired changes to the plan, what does that look like? If there are text amendments to the plan, it describes that process. If there are desired changes to the place type map or to the growth strategy map, it also defines what the process is and what the thresholds are for that as well. Okay, so we did meet on Monday for our first one of our public hearings, and we did have quite a bit of discussion with the board, and we had some citizens show up on specific items. And we wanted to follow up on some of those items tonight with some recommendations based on what we heard on Monday night. And a few of those had to do with specific place types that were brought up by the public. So we had some recommendations or kind of requests to have a couple of the place types changed. So I wanted to go through those and describe what staff's recommendation is for those. The first one of them was up on McDowell and Val Vista that I have circled up on the screen there. So if you're familiar with that area, there's a memory care facility and an assisted living facility on those corners. So it was designated as a local employment center. And you can see that the current general plan designation in that area is neighborhood with the citrus subtype. The current zoning on those properties is office commercial. Those uses, as I described, were the memory care, assisted living, and then there's a vacant parcel that's on the southwest corner. So we are proposing, based on analysis, that we could change that to traditional neighborhood, that we could bring those place types just into what the place type is for the surrounding area. The zoning would be compatible with what is allowed in the traditional neighborhood place type, and it also is compatible with the description and designation of that place type, which allows for some commercial uses along arterial frontages. For the growth strategy, we are not recommending any changes to that property. The next property that was brought up was just kind of this longer stretch that's off of Lindsay and McKellips, as you can see on the screen. It also is a local employment center. Currently, the general plan has a designation of neighborhood suburban and also neighborhood village on that, those properties there. The current zoning is very much a mixture of zoning. We have office commercial, neighborhood commercial, local commercial, and we have single residence 43. As far as the uses, there are offices, restaurants, there's kennel, car washes, and also some single residences within that area. So what staff is proposing is to change that to an urban center, and with the growth strategy revision would be none. But with the urban center, that would allow for a mixture of commercial uses there that would be more compatible with neighborhood. There wouldn't be that concern for any industrial zoning that might have some incompatible uses in the future. The next area that was discussed was a property, it's north of the 202 and east of Gilbert Road. You can see it kind of circled, it's a little more internal towards the 202. So that current place type designation is, the place type designation is rural residential. For the current general plan, that's designated as neighborhood with a large lot rural agricultural subtype. It is within the county right now, so it is not within the city's jurisdiction, but it is zoned RU 43 within the county. Currently, it appears to be a citrus farm. I'm not sure if it's still under operation, but it appears to have been, or it has citrus on the property. We are not proposing any revisions to this place type. We feel that the rural residential is the most appropriate designation for this property, given the current general plan designation, considering the surrounding zoning in the area, considering the proximity to the Lehigh sub-area, and also because of some of the development constraints of that property itself. But what staff is recommending is that we change the place type designation of that property and the property just directly to the north of it here, from conserve to sustain, to really more fully encourage the infill of that site. The next property is generally in the same location. This was also discussed when we were discussing this last property, but it's just south of the 202. So two properties were brought up in a question about their designation as rural residential and possibly changing those to another place type. So currently we were recommending that they are rural residential. The current general plan character area designation is neighborhood suburban subtype. It is a mixture of some pieces are part of the city, some are still within the county. So we have Maricopa County RU 43 zoning, we have single residence 43 zoning, and we have agricultural zoning. On the property, we think there is a nursery there, and there's also some vacant land. What staff is proposing is to change that place type to traditional neighborhood to be to match what's surrounding that property. As you can see, just to the east and kind of in between these properties, where we have a smaller, not a small lot subdivision, but a more dense single-family residential subdivision. To match those, we think that the 202 is a good buffer there between of a more rural residential character and a traditional neighborhood on the south side of that property. And also, we're proposing a change to, or we are proposing a change in the growth strategy. I just don't have it up on the screen, right? But to sustain rather than conserve. So there was quite a bit of discussion when we were discussing these properties about, in general, the local employment place type, and some questions about whether to change the industrial as a secondary use versus a principal use within that type. We went back and thought about this, and we do have concerns that there are bigger implications to do an overall change to the site without really being able to analyze this in more detail and see what the impacts of that would be. But what we did is we singled out all of the local employment areas, and we took a look at those in the context to surrounding residential to see if there are ways that we might be able to adjust some of those place types to make them more compatible and to try to eliminate some of the concerns that we heard for encroaching industrial or possible industrial zoning on those properties. So on the screen, I have several places where we would recommend changes to those place types. So the first one of those would be up on Power and McDowell, which we're recommending that that be changed to a neighborhood center versus a local employment. The next one down, we would suggest that it just be considered part of the neighborhood center down on Power and Brown versus part of local employment. And I'm trying to read all these streets on the map, but they're very small, so bear with me if I get them wrong. Moving on to number 3, there's also another property off of University, and it looks like Signal Butte that we would also recommend to change that to traditional neighborhood. Going to number 4, which is off of the 60 and Chrisman, our recommendation would be to incorporate that with the urban center that's just located west of the property. Number 5 is down off of, it looks like it's around Guadalupe and Ellsworth, but the recommendation would once again be to incorporate that within the traditional neighborhood that's surrounding that property. Number 6 is off of Greenfield and Southern Avenue. And once again, recommendation would be to change that to a neighborhood center. We have 7, which is off of Brown and Val Vista, and that would be recommended for a neighborhood center. Down off of, it's about Longmore and about Baseline, recommendation is to make that an urban center. And it's hard to see because of the scale, but they do have adjacent urban centers. So it'd be just kind of pulling that property in with the surrounding urban center. And then finally on 9, somewhere around Extension and Southern, the recommendation would be to make that urban center as well. Do I have any?
Chair, Board, and Rachel, because you're making recommendations to the board that might be considered in your recommendation to City Council, is it possible for you to pull up an interactive map or somewhere where you can actually zoom in on these 9 parcels and show? Just because I don't know if it's clear to all the board members and the public exactly which areas you're recommending changes to the place types on.
Rachel, if you pull up the general, the plan and you go to that page, you can zoom in on it.
So I might have to switch back and forth a little bit, so you'll have to bear with me. But number 1 was right up here off of Power and Thomas.
Can I also ask, while we go through this, are there changes in the sustain, the evolve versions? The growth strategies simultaneously.
They're on the sheet, is that what you mean?
So is it the same? Stays the
No,
same?
each one, well, they were all different.
Like this one?
They're all different for these.
Okay.
For these ones, yeah. So I'm going to have to go back and forth a little bit. So bear with me, this might take a little while. So Brown and Power looks like. So Brown and Power would be that second property that we're recommending the changes on. So incorporating that with the neighborhood, the surrounding traditional neighborhood. University and Signal Butte. The third one that was discussed was University in Signal Butte. So once again, incorporating this within the traditional neighborhood. Number 4 is the 60 and Chrisman. So number 4, this is right over by Mountain Vista Marketplace, so making this part of the urban center here. Number 5, Guadalupe and Ellsworth. I'm sorry, I'm speaking to myself while I do this too. So slightly south of Guadalupe on Ellsworth, so making this little pocket, this is just north of the Elliott Tech Corridor area, so making this part of the traditional neighborhood as well. Let's see, number 6, Greenfield, Southern. here's number 6, Greenfield and Southern. And going back, I think this one was supposed to be a neighborhood center. It was a recommendation for that one. If I go back to the map. Number 7 is up on Val Vista. Very small pocket up on Val Vista and Brown was number 7, making that part of the traditional neighborhood. Or actually let me double check on with the neighborhood center, sorry. I knew I was speaking wrong. Okay, number 8 is we get into the west side here. Number 8 are there's some, just an office complex that's right here off of Alma School and Baseline, so making this part of the urban center. And then lastly, this pocket over on Dobson, south of Baseline as well, and making that urban center as well. That help provide some context for the board? Okay.
And Chair, board members, just for clarification, we're not looking at making changes to the growth strategy. This was about the whole concept of potentially having industrial uses in those residential areas. So this still allows for that mix of commercial uses, which is what we want in those centers, but not allowing those industrial uses. So the growth strategies have not been modified based on that.
On those other proposed, yeah. And then, so also, because of the discussion we had on possibly changing some of the typical land uses within the various place types, we are making a recommendation to a couple of the place types and those typical land uses. We heard from the board a desire to see more eating and drinking establishments permitted within the various place types across the city. So what staff is recommending is that within the mixed residential, that it was a secondary or a supporting land use. We're recommending that it be a principal land use instead. And then the other change that we are recommending is within the local employment center. Currently, it did not allow for retail, but making this a principal land use in the local employment center as well. So that ends the recommendations based on our conversations the other night. Going over our next steps. So we have our second hearing tonight for your recommendation to City Council, and then we meet with them on May 20th for their action and their, hopefully their adoption of the plan. But after that, it still requires a vote and ratification by citizens of Mesa. So that would be November 5th with that ballot, that general ballot. But with that, we're happy to answer any further questions that the board may have.
Questions? Oh, go for it.
Sure. Thank you for taking a look at that. I really appreciate it. I think a lot of those changes are good ones. I think the only thing I have, and it kind of ties to the next meeting, but maybe making that sliver of that Greenfield and south of the US 60 portion that we're looking at the hotel, maybe looking at something, whether like urban center, downtown, regional center, that has that entertainment recreation that now pulls that one into compliance with the hotel use.
Okay, Chair, board members, we can look at that.
And that's the one that we're seeing for the Greenfield and as part of our other meeting.
Chair, board members, what we'll do is we'll identify a place type for that would pull that entertainment into it before we leave today. So that can be part of your recommendation, just because of the timing. So again, so that we can address that concern.
Go for it.
Will you just clarify, Rachel, and thank you also for those considerations. On evolve versus sustain as far as growth strategies, on evolve it says vacant land, and so is it if it's vacant land, it defaults to evolve, or that there was a, and I think specifically on the 202 on east of Gilbert on the inside of the curve where you have Blandford and then you have the pieces next to it that are essentially vacant or undeveloped. And so I guess what's a thought on sustain versus evolve there?
Yeah, so Chair, Board Member Peterson, so if land is vacant, it does not automatically revert to an evolved strategy, but that was a way for us to describe how those areas were determined for the evolved. It's if we looked at areas that were vacant, that were blighted, that were really in the need of redevelopment for areas that we want to see growth. We do understand throughout the city we have lots of vacant parcels that are primed for infill and redevelopment, but those would fit into their other categories with opportunities for infill and redevelopment based on what the growth strategy is. You may not see in Conserve, for example, this helps staff when they're evaluating development proposals. If they came in and they wanted to do a density that was higher than what was permitted for their place type, we would know that's not appropriate because that's a conserve area. So we know that's really an area that's supposed to remain largely as it is. Whereas if you had a property that was in an evolve area and they were looking to increase the density above what was recommended by the general plan, we can say, well, in that case, that makes sense. We're really wanting to see this area grow and have redevelopment opportunities. So we might encourage, greater density and intensity in this area.
Okay, gotcha. So what then, for future, what triggers the need for a general plan amendment? Does a change to growth strategy change that, or it's only changes to the land place type that would be?
So a general plan amendment would be a change to either the place type map or to the growth strategy map. It could be either or. So an applicant could request a change to either one of those designations. And within the implementation chapter, there's a matrix that shows for the place type maps and it's based on acreages, what would make it be a minor versus a major amendment.
Gotcha. What page
That
is it?
starts on page 133.
Okay. I can look at that while you're talking. Thank you.
Yeah, so based on that chart, it would let you know based on the acreages and what place type you're wanting to change to and from, if it's a major or a minor amendment. But as far as the place type map amendments, the growth strategy map amendments, that's just considered a major or a minor general plan amendment. And there's a difference in process for those. The major amendments can only be applied for once a year. They require 2 hearings per state statute. Per our zoning ordinance, we require 2 hearings regardless, but there's a difference in the time frame as far as how long it takes an applicant to go through that process, because a minor general plan amendment can be applied for any time throughout the year, whereas that major amendment is just throughout the one application period through the year.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? No, nope.
Chair, board members, if I could ask Rachel to bring up that parcel at 60 in Greenfield.
On the place type now?
Sorry, Rachel, in the place types.
Oh, you're not looking for the parcel number? You're wanting the place type? Okay.
It's very blurry. Can't see it.
They're different maps, I'm sorry, that's why we are looking at that. So, let me get my bearings, you'll probably see it before I do.
It's kind of where that X is under 60, after that little chunk out of the city.
No, I'm not looking, I'm not in the right
Where'd we go?
place. Greenfield.
So Chair, board members, we were able to look at that, and if you can see, we have regional centers on either side of that mixed residential area. I think staff would if Planning and Zoning Board is recommending that also be a regional center, I think that that's something we can agree on, that would allow that hotel and that entertainment area.
So we would make that boundary about right where I'm pointing to here,
Yeah.
because this is where,
Yeah.
right, just west of this loop road here.
All right, no other questions from the board right now? You do? No, okay. I think we're good. We'll go to we'll open it up and have a public comment. And so I have some First off, I'll start. We have several comments that were issued electronically to the board. And so just to those people that if they aren't, listening later, Annette Williams, Cynthia Wood, Kat Black, Caitlin Griffith, and Kendra Plug, and Stephen Wood. We did read those comments. Those are all there. I do have one in particular that she did ask to have the comment read aloud. So this is Kimberly Van Riper on 505 East Lehigh Road, Apartment A. And her comment was, I am so wonderfully pleased with the general plan. It is so well written and enjoyable to read. I live in Lehigh and just am so thankful for the rural residential zoning. It is so very appropriate for this area and historically was promised to Lehigh in the form of urban ranch zoning. Thank you so much. This zoning is exactly appropriate to help us maintain and enhance our neighborhood character. Thank you. And obviously she has some support of that.
Chair Ayers, if I may, excuse me.
Oh, there you go.
We did receive 14 additional online comment cards. However, they were submitted after the 2 p.m. deadline. But I just wanted to make you aware, again, they are very similar to
Those comments. Okay.
to the ones that you have received and were able to review.
Okay, thank you. I also have a number of comment cards here today, and so we'll go through these just to kind of let you know as I call you up, if you could please let us know your name and your address. And then we'd ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes just so we could get through these all. And we will begin with Michelle McCroskey. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you. I live at 3021 North Chestnut Circle. I live in the northeast area of Gilbert Road and McDowell. So the comment that was made earlier about changing I'm not going to get this right, changing it from conserve to sustain. First of all, let me back up and say that this whole general plan thing has been terrific. I can't applaud city staff enough. They've been super open, very understanding, worked really hard to understand the character of our neighborhood, so kudos to all of them. Couldn't have been a better experience for us. The one little piece I'm concerned about is changing that parcel that was brought up earlier from conserve to sustain. It's currently ag, it's currently in the county, but it's right next to our neighborhood at R43. Any zoning on that parcel other than R43 would be catastrophic for our neighborhood because one, we're all acre lots. We all have septics. There is no city sewer on that. And it's one of the last agricultural neighborhoods. So I'm kind of hoping that changing it from conserve to sustain isn't going to negatively affect our neighborhood. I guess that's all I can say on that, hoping that we're really, really careful when we change that. I would have preferred it to have been conserve, but I can understand why you would have felt. I'm getting the nod. Okay, I'll trust you on that one. But kudos to the staff because it couldn't have gone better. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Next, I have Kathy Livingston.
Well, we kind of have the same situation as the lady before us. We're on.
Could you just tell me your name and address? Yep.
I'm sorry, 2942 East Jasmine.
Thank you.
We have the same situation. We have a large empty plot of land behind us. We're all on acres. And we've had lots of different people over the years. We've been there for 39 years, coming in to want to put high density behind us. And I want to make sure that the changes that you've made are not going to allow somebody to come up behind us and put in, 10,000 apartments. It's only, how many acres is it? 5, less than 5, I think. So the change that you have done, I need to know if that will affect the density behind us. Okay.
We'll have some responses at the end for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate your time. Next, I have Kara Jones.
Hi, My name's Kara Jones. My address is 1845 North 29th Place, and that was my next door neighbor, Kathy, who would be greatly affected in what I think is a loose wording of urban center. Can you guys tell me what you think of the word urban? What does that, anybody, what?
I don't think we can we make any comments? Yeah, we can answer questions usually.
I would say high density, and we're not wanting anything on that lot on Lindsay and McKellips to be anything less than R43, certainly nothing less than R35. And so when I think of urban center, I think that would allow for high-density housing, as we've had to repeatedly fight off. And so I guess my next question that I have is, why does it seem like the burden is placed upon current homeowners, who I might add made their home purchases predicated on the zoning of their property as well as adjacent properties, to prove that a zoning change is not appropriate? It seems like the burden should be placed squarely upon the proposer, with the preponderance of evidences and examples of how the zoning change and development proposal is a complete value add for all parties. Another question I have, why is it that the developers are allowed to operate via proxy only for these proposals and proceedings? If they really cared about the community feedback, they would get their data directly and offer their solutions and rebuttals directly. I thought it was interesting that the 10-year plan, when asked what the differences were, it was said they was similar. I think it's interesting that it's a similar plan when we went through a major lockdown and COVID, and people are different about how they go about their work. And it seems like some of these proposals are remiss of that. There's people that work from home that have figured out how to not have to go and build more buildings and find more places to work. And I would think that there's an invitation. I mean, I know husbands who are making their own sourdough now. There's a bigger setup for setting up roots at home. And it seems like Mesa keeps rendering smaller and smaller footprints, which isn't ideal for building families. So some of my questions I have, what do you think of urban center? I think it shouldn't be added to the amendment for the Lindsay and McKellips lot. I think it should be as is, and certainly nothing less than R43 or R35. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And I'm one of those. I learned how to do sourdough. I admit to that fully. Next up, Ron Williams.
Hello, Chairman Harris and board members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Ron Williams. I live at 2318 North Pomeroy Circle. I'm an Arizona Veterans Hall of Fame inductee, class of 2022. So I can certainly appreciate service to the community, as I've received a Lifetime Achievement Award for service. I'm here to speak in support of the plan that is originally presented by the staff. As from the day that I got the call from Mayor John Giles to serve on the General Plan Advisory Committee, to the day the mayor and city council voted me in on the General Plan Advisory Committee, to the day the committee voted me in as chairperson, I would tell you that all the hours, all the community meetings, all the time that we spent working on this general plan has been worth it. So I just wanted to make sure that I came and advocate and spoke on behalf of this general plan. I can't say enough about the city staff. Jeff and Rachel are champions. They're true assets for this city. And of course, I had to resign from the general plan because I've submitted my paperwork to run for Mesa City Council District 1. But it's been a joy, it's been a pleasure, and I hope that, and I know that the city can't specifically advocate, but I just want to make sure that we get the facts out to our citizens, and I'm hoping that we can get this across the finish line. So, and I also want to thank Marilyn Crosby and her leadership team from Lehigh. I live in Lehigh as well. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Appreciate your service as well. Next up, Marilyn Crosby.
Good afternoon. My name is Marilyn Crosby. I'm at 2560 North Horn and 2566 North Horn. I I want to be honest in the fact that I am not always the greatest ally of city staff. And I had, in the beginning of this plan, I had been incredibly critical, and I will own that. And I think that they have done nothing short but rise to the occasion that all of us should be proud of. I do hope that you'll take a look at what the citizen was saying about Lindsay and McKellips, as I can't speak as an expert on that, but it sounds like maybe there's something to look at there. The leadership that I witnessed by Jeff and by Rachel and by Ron Williams in this process, I think we should all be proud of, truly. As I mentioned, I have been cynical, and I am one of the only citizens, I think, in Mesa that has read both general plans cover to cover multiple times. And that is a badge that I will claim for many years to come, because I really don't think there's many citizens that read it. The past plan, I'm going to say that the plans are incredibly different. The last plan was a bane of my existence. It caused me many hours of heartache and frustration in defense of my neighborhood because of the lack of clarity. I believe that it put city staff in an awkward position because it didn't give clear understanding and the pictorial illustrations to see what was necessary and wanted in neighborhoods. While it claimed the importance of a sense of place and achieving the character of the neighborhood, it didn't actually create the roadmap that made it possible for them to achieve the goal. This plan does. And I endorse it highly. I am so grateful for the hours that have been put in by all those that have mentioned. I wish I could mention every committee member by name. I can't. I could identify them by face, but I believe that they rose to an occasion that I'm not sure that anybody really would ever want to. I think that seeing Rachel actually pull up the map and be able to go to each of these parcels that are in question at a moment's notice attests to how well she knows every single parcel in Mesa. I cannot imagine that. I'm a realtor. I can't do that, okay? So anyway, I want to just thank everyone present and let you know that I do endorse this plan, and I am just grateful to be able to do that. I'm not sure that I ever believed that I would have been able to. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time as well. Appreciate it. Mary Grace McNear.
Thanks, Rachel. Perfect. Thank you. Good evening, Chair, board members. My name is Mary Grace McNear. I'm with the law firm Gilbert Bliley, and our address is 701 North 44th Street in Phoenix. I am here to talk about the 50 acres let's see if I can get it to appear up there. Can we get it on the screen? Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. Oh, man. And now there we go. Okay. So I am here to talk about this 50 acres right here. We spoke about it a little bit the other day. Thank you for your, and there have been some developments that I wanted to talk about. Very appreciative of staff for taking another look at that and moving the growth strategy to sustain. I'm still going to try to persuade you to move the place type to traditional neighborhood. So let me go through my 3 minutes, and I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can. We're talking about the 50 acres north of the Loop 202 and a little bit east of Gilbert Road. The property is the county, and it's currently being leased for citrus farming. Historically, it was farmed for cotton as well as citrus. The property is zoned agricultural and has a special mining exemption in the county. Kaiser Citrus's plan is to entitle and sell the property to a developer for residential use. And although the property is in the county, we've been working very closely with the city because that's how we will get sewer and water. We've had some pre-application feedback on, we're under contract to sell the property now to Horton. We've had some pre-application feedback on Horton's plan that was generally positive. As you can see, the surrounding property is some large lot residential and some farmland. And if you look south of the freeway, and if I could show you more of an aerial, you'll see there's already smaller lot development in that traditional family area there, traditional residential area there south of the freeway. So that's already been zoned and has some small lot development, which is appropriate for next to the freeway. That's a transitional area. So inside the freeway loop, there's already redevelopment happening, and the farmland all around this area is slowly transitioning to residential development. That's what we think should happen to this 50-acre property here. So let's talk about the change in the general plan designation that's suggested. As the current general plan is neighborhood, and we have confirmed that we could do the Horton plan under the current zoning and general plan designation. In the county, we're zoned RS43, 1 dwelling unit per acre. The proposed 2050 designation is rural residential with a growth strategy of conserve, which I guess now it's going to be sustain. But just let me tell you why it should not be rural residential. That's 1 dwelling unit for every 1.3 acres. So automatically you're losing density in this new designation. Conserve growth strategy means the area should experience little change and be limited to home improvements. That's a quote. The conserve growth strategy should be used for land with, quote, significant development constraints. We do have some development constraints, but they're not significant to prevent an offer and a proposal for the development of this property for residential. Also, going back to the general plan, historic resources, they aren't there. Neighborhoods with significant heritage, it comes up to the Lehigh neighborhood, but no one has, that land has been farmed or mined since it was developed. School sites, none of those. Public lands or parklands, none of those. I want to talk just a little bit about, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. So I want to talk for 1 minute, though, about the notice. It seems like we're late to this notice, but we are in the county. I understand that they didn't reach out to individual property owners, and I get that. And I think the outreach has been great. But we don't read the East Valley Tribune or La Prensa, and we didn't know until very recently. So there were some neighborhood meetings in Lehigh to which we were not invited. And it just seems to me that if you're in a neighborhood meeting and your city staff and you're talking about property that is not owned by the people who are offering opinions, that it would have been nice for us to know that that was going on, either before the meeting to be invited or after the meeting for someone to reach out to us. Even though we're not city residents, it would have been nice to have that conversation. Okay, so we still would like to have the more traditional family residential, but I will thank you for your time and go back to my seat. Good evening.
Yeah.
Chair Board, are there any comments in particular that you'd like a response to?
If any of the public commentary, I mean, from the,
How about that Urban Center one?
you don't necessarily.
What was that? This one? Lindsay.
Chair
and
Board
Folsom?
members, Rachel, can you pull up that site again at Lindsay and McKellips? I'd like to just, and actually talk a little bit about the current land use designations and the current zoning on the site that we are proposing as the urban center, because it doesn't touch that residential area. So if we look at
Let me get this all full screen here for you. Okay, and I can't see it fully on mine.
I know you're talking about that. Just reiterate the difference between rezoning and general plan, that nothing's being rezoned in this process,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
That was going.
That is correct, yeah. So there is one little kind of sliver that kind of cuts up into this area that is RS 43, which I think might be the parcel that is being discussed. So there is a potential if the board would like to try to carve that out of the urban center But I believe that is the piece in particular that's being brought up.
And Chair, Board, to Board Member Peterson's comment and for the benefit of the public, the general plan does not rezone any property. If any property were to be rezoned, they'd have to come through and do the complete rezoning process and get approval from the city council. So there is no change in zoning districts on property made with this general plan.
Anything else? You guys have any other questions or anything? Okay. No? All right. I think we're good. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to close the public hearing and open it up to board discussion, or if there's anyone that would like to make a motion for recommendation to city council on the plan, with the one caveat, do we have any language or anything that we include for the Greenfield site I'm seeing a piece of paper. So that, any discussion from the board?
The motion is for all of the changes that they discussed today. You can read it like that.
Perfect, thank you. We can discuss.
So the staff recommendation is ready to change, right? That's my question. Yes,
Yeah.
I guess just to clarify, there's with the recommendation, there's the layer of all the recommendations made by staff in response to the last meeting as well, if the motion includes those, right? Or
I believe they do, yes,
Yeah.
everything.
Yep, and then any modifications to those.
So that'll be this language here once we.
Is that specific to the hotel site, or does that also include all of them?
Staff in today's hearing, yes.
Okay.
So
But it's only the Greenfield, everything else.
Yeah.
Does the motion need to identify each of the?
Or
the
just say each of
changes?
No, because
Yeah,
part of the
if-
presentation today, we're good, right?
Yes, so if the motion is to include all of the changes presented by staff in their presentation, as well as that additional change to the hotel site, the language up there will cover that. If there's a different motion not to include some of those changes, those would have to be pointed out specifically.
So that's the question, whether anyone has anything.
Yeah, anybody else has anything that they want to discuss? I'm not hearing that. Are you getting ready to say something there?
No, I mean,
Okay.
someone needs to make a motion on this, right?
Do you, Counselor, want to?
I'm already signed up for the consent agenda on the next one.
Yeah,
I will take a crack, I'm sorry, I'll turn my mic on. I'll take a crack at this. So, so we are on 2A, the 2A and 2B need to be moved separately, or can they be moved together?
It would just be one motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
It's just about the recommendation.
yes, okay. So I will move that we adopt in case PZ, well, agenda item 2A, case PZ 24064, conduct a public hearing on a new City of Mesa general plan, moving forward together, tomorrow's Mesa 2050 general plan, and agenda item 2B, which is case PZ 24065, discuss and make a recommendation to the City Council on a new City of Mesa general plan, moving forward together, tomorrow's Mesa 2050 general plan. I move that we approve the general plan as it was presented today with the additional modifications and recommendations discussed by staff in the staff presentation, plus the following modification that we adopt. We include the revisions to the place types, growth strategies, and typical land uses presented by staff at today's hearing. Gotcha.
And
That's
just
my
to
motion.
clarify for the board, the motion is to recommend adoption of the
Right.
general plan with those changes to the city council.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there
I
a-
second.
Thank you very much. All in favor? Please vote. We're all here today. We don't need to talk to anybody online, so unanimous with all the board members here voting in favor, recommending the adoption of the general plan. So appreciate that. And so now we will be Actually, do we have to do an adjournment? We do, okay. So I would request a motion to adjourn the special meeting today for the general plan.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? And again, that's unanimous, so we will adjourn that meeting.